Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Wednesday webinar. We know how busy schedules are, especially around this time of the year, so we're thankful that you were able to join us. As a reminder, webinars are meant to be interactive, so feel free to stay on camera, come off of mute, and ask any questions in the chat room. And then also, this will be recorded, so we will send the recording out after the webinar concludes with a copy of the presentation. All right, getting into some recap. So last week we had Francisca Sanchez, who closed out our two-part series talking about school policies and classroom policies that really can uplift students' home language in the classroom. And then after today, we're taking a short break. So we'll be back January 7th after the new year. So you guys get a little bit 2-week break from our webinars. And then with that, I want to kind of get into it. I am excited to introduce today's guest, who really understands the boots on the ground reality of school leadership. Our speaker today is Rob Effa. Rob currently serves as the superintendent and principal of a K-8 district in Redding, California. But before stepping into his current role, he spent 7 years leading an elementary school with high needs, serving a population of 85% free and reduced lunch students. It was there that Rob and his team did something really remarkable. They reimagined their RTL model, building out specialized school-wide teams for academics, attendance, and behavior. And his leadership during that transformation time was so impactful that he was named the 2019 National Distinguished Principal Representative for the state of California. So really, really great work. He's a champion for student support, and he's a proven leader. And today, Rob will be walking us through developing and sustaining student support teams that address academics, behavior, and attendance. And so with that, I'm excited to pass the torch on to Rob so he can teach us some things.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. Looks like we have a small crew here, so feel free to just chime in. It might be more of a dialogue than a presentation, so we'll just get right to it. So feel free. Let us know what you're asking for if you have some specifics. I'm a superintendent principal right now of a small school district, 280 students, TK8 in Northern California, Palo Cedar, just east of Redding. And it's actually my third district I've been in where we've applied these student support teams. And it was so effective that it just seems like it works wherever. My current district is not so much of a free and reduced lunch. We're actually a higher economic school, but the program works just as well. And it really allows me to free up time to be an educational leader rather than just focusing on individual student needs all the time. Not that I still don't do it, but I have a delegated team that works really well. So you'll hear how all that works. So I'm going to share my screen. And can everybody see that? Why student support teams? Okay, great. So we'll just go through this. Why student support teams? Well, students need to be present and ready to learn. I mean, academics is a key focus, and some data that supports that in 23-24, 47% of California students met or exceeded ELA standards. So how do we get that higher? Well, we got to focus on the needs of students. They miss foundational skills based on attendance and behavior, and students have gaps based on previous learning, transferring schools, and a variety of access to academic support. So how do we identify those needs for students so we can hit their potential when it comes to academics? And that's what it came down to. My team back in my original school that we developed this, we saw the need, we created a program, and I've been modeling that program ever since. Just a footnote, that school 3 years ago, when we created a position, a paraprofessional position, I just saw him actually on the football field, and he's still doing the job, even though I've been gone for 15 years. So it's kind of stuck with them. So creating student support teams is a critical part. If you haven't already done that, I can walk you through the basics and see what it takes. First and foremost, a quality leadership team. And that's not just for student supports, it's just a quality leadership team. Improvement of schools, how do we identify that? And it's critical to have one. All the schools I've had, I've either developed or maintained one, just so we know what the needs of the students are at the time. So creating and using a leadership team for improvement is critical. The liaisons that I put in these leadership teams are PLC teacher representatives. If you're a PLC school, you have different PLC teams. It's critical to have one representative from each teacher team. A special education intervention teacher representative. Again, depending on the size of your school, we're a very small school, so that is one person. But in bigger schools, you can have multiple people that will represent that. A classified staff representative is really important to have because they are the liaisons to classified staff. Don't underestimate the power of your paraprofessionals. Very valuable in supporting student needs. And then a school counselor. Again, if you're a small school like me, my psychologist and counselor is the same person. So, in fact, they're only here 1 day a week. We're so small, so our meetings are on those days. So, very important to have them. And then finally, administration. An administrator needs to be a part of this team because if you're just simply delegating it out, then you're not going to be part of it and making sure that critical actions are being taken. So, very important to have a quality leadership team. And then school transformation. Once you've developed that leadership team, how are you going to identify the needs and work through it? The best professional development I ever went to, and it was through Solution Tree, the PLC model. We did an RTI presentation. It was up in Seattle. I took my whole leadership team, and we actually sat down, and in 2 days, we created a brand new RTI model. We looked at the needs of our students and we developed it. And we looked on the attendance needs, the social emotional needs, and the behavior needs. And so the probably the most transformative thing that I learned in that workshop is this RTI model. And we're used to the RTI model, which is a triangle and you develop the foundations. But if you look at this specific one, on the right of the triangle is simply academics. And we had a pretty good academic RTI model. It needed a little bit of updating, but the transforming part of this RTI model is on the left, it's the school-wide supports. And this is what we didn't have in place. And the school-wide supports would be what is your attendance support and what is your behavior support? And we were finding a lot of our students were behavior was getting in the way of them learning. So how could we support that? So we took this RTI model, we started from scratch, we came back, just a little footnote on that. Our RTI team, our leadership team was totally bought in, but we knew we needed to transform it into the rest of the school. And so we actually had to pick the right time to do that. And it took us 6 months before we even presented this to our staff because we wanted to make sure that they were ready for it. But in the end, we put this into place and it became very effective. And I'll talk a little bit through what that looks like. So at that point, we decided we need to start developing our student support teams. And it starts with establishing goals. Develop your SMART goals, make them attainable goals, make them quantifiable goals. And then you got to communicate to all your stakeholders. And when I mean all, I mean all. And again, I'll go back to making sure your paraprofessionals are part of it, your teachers are part of it, your support staff is part of it. Make sure everybody is a key factor. I always had a monthly paraprofessional meeting because they needed to know what our goals were. And in that meeting, we would simply talk about here are our goals and here are our scores that are showing where we are. If we just did an academic assessment, I shared that. I would share what the number of citations that were coming in for our school for behavior. What is our attendance rates? Because if our goal is to hit a 96% attendance rate and we're at 95.5, getting everybody on board just encourages them to talk to the students to come to school. Very important to communicate. And then regularly report out your progress at your staff meetings, para meetings, site council. So get your parents involved. And then obviously board meetings. You want your board members to know what's going on as well. Um, the roles of a support team are critical. I said this before, administrator, you've got to have administrator sitting on this team. Very important because you are actually creating the model, the focus, but you're also there to make decisions and put action into play. If I have one of my team members come to me and say, we're really struggling with this, I need to know how to communicate that with the rest of my staff and make it part of the whole vision. So administrator needs to be there, your counselor, psychologist. Again, that could be multiple people if your school's big enough. My school, I've got one person that does that. And then teachers, classified staff, and this is the new thing that was created, behavior support paraprofessional. I'll take a little bit of time talking about that. Here's what I found. I was the single administrator at my previous school where this was developed. And I spent a lot of time doing discipline. In fact, I remember I'd go to a district office meeting and I'd come back and I would turn my head around the corner to see how many kids were waiting in line to talk to me because of behavior issues. That needed to change because I was not the educational support person I needed to be because I spent so much time on discipline. So when we did this whole new transformation, we actually created a brand new position, and it was a dedicated paraprofessional staff who basically worked on behavior. And this person had no schedule. They were just there and they were on call. And so the strategy was, if a teacher, usually it was a teacher, needed some support, let's just say that they had a student that was being disruptive in class, they could call what I call dispatch, was the office, and the office would identify the key person on the behavior support team that could go support. And we hired this paraprofessional, which was a very financially smart way to do it because I, in essence, had almost like an assistant principal, but working with a lower wage. And this person was simply dedicated to nothing but working with students. No schedule other than you're always on call. Um, my second school, I did this. We actually had to hire a second person because we had enough behaviors to support that, but it took a lot off my plate, and there was always somebody there, and the teachers loved it in the sense that they could then have somebody support them and help the student get through their needs when they weren't ready to learn, because they weren't ready to learn and it was disrupting the rest of the class. And the paraprofessional would go in, take them out, assess the situation, and then the strategy was always they're coming back into class as soon as they're ready to learn. And so that was a key transformative thing. And this works great for small schools, big schools, but it's also financially feasible. So in a school like mine, when I'm the sole administrator and I need to focus on a bunch of the strategies of being an educational leader, now I have somebody who's a go-to that can actually work on these. And they're developing great relationships, and so um, critical component, which I think anybody could employ very easily. So your meetings, you got to have regular meetings. So the frequency, you decide that. Do you want to do them weekly? Do you want them bi-monthly? My first school, we did it every other week for an hour at a time. I now do them every week for half an hour. Sometimes they go over because we have more information to talk about than we initially think. 30 to 60 minutes, and make sure you're doing data review. What and who gathers the data? Data disaggregation. I take my school information system, it's Aries, and I just simply do a query. I can figure out how many kids have got citations since the last meeting. We can then sort it as a spreadsheet, and I can figure out what students need extra support, maybe what grades need extra support, what time of day, because we put in our Aries. Oh, it happened on the playground. If we're having a lot more behaviors on the playground, we're going to identify resources to that. Um, we look at staff requests. You're going to get staff say, "Oh, Johnny's just been having a hard time the last couple of days. What can we do to help him?" So we talk about that, and then we decide how we're going to allocate our resources. I need my behavior support paraprofessional to be on the playground during third grade because we're having lots of problems with third grade playing football, whatever it is. Um, we notice that this class is having more behavior issues. Maybe it's a staffing thing, that staff needs more support. Maybe it's just a cohort. You know how it works, right? You just get those kids that seem to be in that group. So we will allocate our resources based on that. And we'll have great conversations just about, what do you think? What do you think? And let's be honest about this. A lot of time it's what's going to stick. We try something, it works for that student, maybe that day, but not the next day. And so we'll keep trying and brainstorming lots of ideas. And so it's a very dynamic meeting that's talking about how we can dedicate those resources. And then maintaining your student support teams. Excuse me. Maintain those consistent meetings, update and review your data, figure out what data you want to look at. We have a two-tiered system when it comes to behavior. We've got our citations, which are our major referrals. And then we have the minor ones. We call them blue slips, and anybody can write those. Doesn't mean the principal's talking to them, but we look at those as well. In fact, my psychologist counselor right now, he's actually getting his admin credential and he has an assignment. So we're going to try something new. We're going to hand out positive slips more often, and we're going to see if it decreases the amount of behaviors that are coming in. So those are things that we can allocate in these meetings. We present the data. If it's an attendance meeting, we're looking at what kind of students are chronically absent. Why are they absent? I bring in my attendance clerk for this, and we have discussions. We just had our attendance meeting yesterday. We looked at the number of chronically absent kids there are and how we can strategize to either decrease that or be proactive and prevent other kids from becoming that level. So we bring the data in for attendance and academics. The academic support team's critical. The teachers will bring in data. They're going to say, these are the interventions we've tried. I need some other ideas. How can we brainstorm that? My very first school, our academic team became so effective that by the time they got to these meetings, I and some of the other team members, we could actually predict very closely to see if that kid was going to qualify for special ed or not, based on all the programs that we had applied. And that is a good example of an effective meeting. And then we look at year to year data. So I will constantly compare this year to next year. A good example of that is our behavior. Let's be honest, December, right? That's when you seem to get a lot more of these students that are deregulated. The attendance or the behavior creeps up, and we can track that. And we just did our meeting and we saw that this year, our December behavior, it's a little better than last year. Okay, why is that? What are we doing? But we're also anticipating that this last week of school might be that one that gets us over the top. So we can kind of track and we can find out what's the big months. And you guys wouldn't be surprised to find out that typically it's October and March. Why is that? Well, there's no holidays in there, right? Our staff gets tired, our students get tired, our parents get tired. And so that's when you see the behaviors coming up. But we can track that. And I know the last 3 years of my data because I keep track of it and we can match that. And then we set timelines for action. Okay, if we know that October is going to be a big month, what are we going to do to prepare for that? And so we can set our resources. And what we have found with all of this data review and allocation of resources, it's dropping year to year. October seems to be a little bit better. And maybe next year's October won't be quite so well, but if you look at the whole year, it's getting better. And that's the data that I tracked at our very first school, and we can see how things improved significantly. We dropped our suspensions by 2/3. We dropped our referrals by 60%. I mean, it was significant, the drops that we did after implementing these. And then the attendance support team. We'll talk about that specifically. Identify your support team and staffing roles. Again, I'm on a small school. So what I'm doing right now, I sit on the team. My attendance clerk sits on the team because she's the one that's taking all the data. She's the one that talks to the parents when they're absent. And then my support paraprofessional. Now, it just so happens that we've become effective enough that that behavior support paraprofessional, she has a little bit more time on her hands because it's working well. So I've actually employed her to sit on my attendance support team. This was not the case originally, but because there's some more time allocated for this person, she now sits on it and she's actually the one that makes the attendance calls, right? Letter one, we just send it out via mail. Letter two, we send out a second letter and we make a phone call. My paraprofessional does that, right? She's the good cop. She's going to say, hey, let's get this attendance done because you really don't want to sit in a school attendance review team meeting with Mr. Effa because, you know, he's not going to be really nice when he has to talk to you about it. So let's see if we can figure this out. So she's the good cop. She makes the calls. We try and avoid that third letter, which is the student attendance review team. And that's where I get to come in, put them on a contract and not be so nice. So that seems to work out very well. So my current team is 3 people. A bigger school, I actually included my counselor and maybe my psychologist because a lot of times they know the students as well. So that team could be 3 to 5 people. And we would meet usually once a week or every other week. Did I just lose my share? You guys still see that slideshow?
We can see it, yeah.
Okay. Behavior support team. This one is myself. It's that student support paraprofessional, and it's my counselor and psychologist. Again, small school, that's one person, the counselor psychologist. He's only here 1 day a week, so that's when we meet. Bigger schools might have full-time counselors, full-time psychologists. You might have more than one counselor. I'd bring them all in on that team, and you're going to meet with them and go over all this data. Obviously, the more people on your team, maybe the more time you have to allocate to meetings. We meet once a week, half an hour. Sometimes it goes further because if we have more students to talk about, but we will talk about individual students, we will talk about strategies, and we're also going to talk about those individual students' family life. Why is it that their behavior has actually increased this time of year? And we put together strategies. We then will go out. My paraprofessional is great because she has good relationships with my staff. So we will talk about what needs to be disseminated from this meeting and talk about how the teachers can support that or how we can support the teachers. Because everybody's different, right? Some have those great classroom management skills, some need a little bit of support, and some just need that little, hey, kudos. I had one teacher, she was struggling at the beginning of the year. She tried some new strategies. I went in there, big changes, and I made sure she knew that those were working well. So um, that was a good one. So that's how our behavior support team works. And then finally, the academic student support team. I have it a standing calendar. It's on my calendar that at any point in time, and again, we do these on Mondays because that's when my psychologist counselor is there. It's really the psychologist that needs to be part of this. But it's standing on my calendar mornings and afternoons on Monday. If a teacher comes in with a student that they're recommending for it, we can just plug them into that calendar and roll. Many times I just cancel it because there's not a need. But this is there for any students that we identify with academic needs. And I told you at my very first school, after implementing this academic support team, we could predict if a kid was going to qualify for special ed or not because we had such an effective team. So that team is going to be the administrator, which is me, your PLC teacher representatives. So depending on how many you have, what grade levels are covered, a special ed intervention teacher, my resource teacher sits on it. At my first school, I had a special ed teacher and an intervention teacher, so they both sat on it. Classified staff representative was really important, and try and pick that classified staff that knows the kids, like all the kids. The ones that's out there at the playground. We brought in our librarian at my original school because she saw all the kids weekly and she could tell how they worked. But pick that paraprofessional that just knows them, or as many as possible, students. And then your psychologist and counselor, if you've got one. And I put counselor psychologist twice. So make sure that you have them sitting on that. What do you do in an academic support team? The teacher fills out that they need a meeting. We would give them a form. Please give us all the information you can, assessment needs, what interventions have you tried, what's working, what's not working, what kind of communication have you had with your parents. We bring that in, and then we just do a brainstorm session. This is what you've tried. Why don't you try this? Is this going to work? And then we'll do a follow-up meeting because in 4 weeks, you're going to try this. If it doesn't work, we're going to go to the next level, which could be an SST meeting. Maybe we've already gotten there. And eventually it goes to, are we going to assess them for special ed? And by that time, if we feel that we need to assess them for special ed, we were pretty confident that they were going to qualify. So that's how we did our academic support team. And those are the three support teams that we do at our school. And that is our attendance, our behavior, and our academic. And that seems to fit all the needs of our students. And it goes back to that RTI pyramid. And that's how we hit them and support them in any way that we can. Relationships, relationships, relationships. I cannot talk about that enough because in these teams, you're always talking about how you're relating with the students and how you can provide those supports. We can go into a lot more detail with these support teams. In fact, I've done presentations in the past where it took a lot of more time. I've done hour seminars on this. And if it's something that people like, we can bring it back and we can go into more specifics when it comes to that. So with that, I'll open it up for questions and answers. You can type in the chat. Feel free to come off mute and talk about it. But hopefully you found something valuable in this that you can take back to your schools and implement, if not right away, in the near future.